Let's talk about something else that keeps coming up. Every time we talk about Nigeria, or every time we do Shaka Extra Time, people want us to talk about Biafra. There is a comment here from Uche Biafra Nwachiniki. With due respect, Shaka, do you hate the people of Biafra? What do you think? What can you talk about Biafra's problem on your program?
Which, on the contrary, I have absolutely no reason why I would hate Biafrans. The only problem I think I have with Biafra is that the last time I checked, that was a political expression given to an area that was the southeastern part of Nigeria when, you know, there was a second military coup back in 1966. A coup led, I believe, by then a Captain Murtala Muhammad and Captain Danjuma. They were able to overthrow the government of Ilonsi. Now, Major General Ilonsi was an Igbo, and earlier he had actually come to power through a coup that was largely led by Igbo army officers, most of them in fact majors. And here I remember, of course, one of the majors that I admired so much. He was like my hero, really, Chukuma Kaduna Nziogu, who was a major. He had been Sandhurst trained and all that kind of stuff. And again, this coup was actually brought about because of corruption at that time. And so what happened was the fact that in the first coup itself, the senior military officers who happened to come from the north had been killed, eliminated. And then the people who were running the show and what have you were basically mostly Igbos. They were majors. In fact, here I am reminded even of a Major Emmanuel Ifia Juna, who had been a university graduate from, Ibadan, University College, and had actually been also a Commonwealth high jump champion in the 1950s. But this man was a major, and he was supposed to be leading the coup operations in Lagos, but apparently didn't quite succeed. And the man that I told you was my hero, Chukuma Kaduna Nziogu, was based in the north. He did his part and what have you, and that is how Major General Ironsi eventually became the first military head of state after toppling the government of, there was a prime minister who was an incredible, orator, an incredible orator at that time, Satafawa Balewa. Now, I also remember that when I first came here, in 1976, by the way, my first roommate was Maseras Osuji. Not only was Osuji an Igbo man, but Maseras, at least by his confession, had actually been a gallant soldier in the Biafran army.
Interesting.
And because of the fact that the federal Nigerian government fought against Biafra, which had been led by a man who had actually later became a friend of mine, and I covered him so much. We used to talk very occasionally. Dim Odumegu Ojukwu. He had actually been a lieutenant colonel in the Nigerian army, along with people like now General Gowon. They had been lieutenant colonels together and what have you. But because of the second coup, they found themselves on two sides of the aisle. The Igbos were executed in the northern part of Nigeria, those who were living there and what have you, and they ran to the eastern part, the southeastern part of Nigeria, which eventually they declared to be an independent republic of Biafra. There was also another man who came from there who I respected so much and who really inspired me, at least intellectually. You're talking about a man called Dr. Nandi Azikiwe. He was called Zeke of Africa. He was one of the earliest Africans, arguably, to gain a PhD from the United States. And I had always admired those people from that side and what have you. And I had sympathized, and I continue to sympathize and empathize with the people who come from that political expression that was known as Biafra. But when we think about Biafra now, I honestly think this is an issue that should be resolved by the federal government of Nigeria, or at least the African Union should come into play, or, you know, and figure out how to deal with these, because I think the issue really is not the geographical expression or the geographical location where most of the Igbo community live, but I think it is the issue of lack of adequate social, economic, political justice. And in my work, I have tried very, very much to be an advocate of social, economic, political justice for all of us. And I think that Nigeria has a great opportunity, especially given that they are going to elections in February next year. And I remember that at one time, I actually had a show. We were talking about Nigeria. And one of the guests was a guy called Atiku Abubakar, who was then the vice president. I remember some Igbo in the audience asked him about why are Igbo being discriminated against. 30 years later, at that time, not a single Igbo had actually been promoted to the rank of general. You cannot believe the impact of that particular edition of Straight Talk Africa. 2 weeks later, the government promoted about 3 or 4 Igbos in the armed forces to the ranks of brigadier, major general, and what have you. So I hope that if this man can actually become president, Atiku Abubakar can find it in his heart to make sure that he reaches out to all Nigerians, including people who say they come from Biafra. But when it comes to what can I say and what can I do about Biafra, I have to say, Uche, that is above my pay grade.